Hi everyone, welcome to tonight's live chat. It is go time. The honey flow has started here in Tennessee. Our bees are starting to bring it in, and sometimes when I accidentally bump a frame a little bit, there's a nectar shake. That's what we call them, is whenever nectar comes out of the frames, it just shakes right on out. There's a lot to discuss: queen rearing, swarm control, making splits, avoiding making splits if you don't have the equipment. All kinds of panic right now. But it's good. JB Goodman, hello from Virginia. Good to hear from you, JB. I want to say thanks for helping us at the conference pack up on a Saturday night. You stayed all the way till just about, it might have stayed till midnight. It was a long night. Tom Pearson, Southwest Louisiana. So you guys have been in your honey flow for a good bit then. Black Mountain, North Carolina. All right. Whoa, big hairdo. Jason Powell. Well, that's because I haven't had time to go get a haircut and literally was in the bees 25 minutes ago, and I was in bees about 20 minutes after I got out of bed this morning, so it is just that time of the year. Look like a little boy. Well, thank you. That's going to pay dividends in 20 years. Hello from Southwest PA. Sevierville, Tennessee. Oh, we know that place pretty good. Hello from Florida Slick. That was my grandpa's nickname because he did his hair a lot like this. Hi, all from Scotland. All right, so we got people from all over the place. Hello from Vermont. And make sure you guys let me know if you have any questions and all that stuff, and we'll start getting to those. And want to say a big thank you to Austin Payne for just opening her right up with a very generous donation. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, Austin, hit me with them. And Sweet Harlan Honeybees. And look at that. Their thumbnail is in front of the Hive Life step and repeat. That's what they call those. And so thank you guys for coming to the conference as well. All right, Ted Jackson says Dustin Wiggins was at his house on Easter Sunday to deliver his boxes. Awesome. Well, glad to hear that. It's good to have some bee equipment. Oh boy, James. Let's see. All right, Randy. Good to hear you. Tar-Heeled Beekeeper. Has anyone heard from Gus? Missed seeing his videos. So I actually talked to Gus, I believe it was yesterday. It's hard to keep track of the days right now. And he's just taking a little bit of a break from him. It's hard, and I get it. He's a one-man operation. I mean, if without Laurel, I mean, this all would be impossible for me to do, and it's almost impossible as it is. And that's why we're working. I mean, between the two of us, we're probably putting in 21 to 24 hours a day, depending on the day, easily this time of the year. And so that makes a big difference, you know, and Gus has got a lot of bees, and it's hard to do nukes and honey and all that kind of stuff, and videoing by yourself is very difficult. The video quality goes down quite a bit, so, you know, big thank you to my hot, sexy wife, Laurel. I hope she's watching this. Hey, Don. Speaking of videos, I need to see more Natalie beekeeping like Natalie videos. So I have been seeing some, but I need to see more. Is it too early to let a split raise their own queen in Indiana? So, the look of death. Oh, come on. It's super flattering. There's women that kill for a compliment from a stud like me. Boy, I just don't know when to stop. All right, is it too early to split and raise their own queen in Indiana? It probably depends on what part of Indiana. Are you southern Indiana? Are you northern Indiana? Probably not too far away from it, though. If you're seeing a lot of drones, if the temperature is consistently to where a queen can get out and fly, and you have both of those things, then you're in good shape. And it'll be a little bit if you're letting them raise their own queen. So one thing that I would really like to experiment with is not a walk-away split, but a really thought-out one. So the main thing we need to raise a queen for our split is we need plenty of young bees to be able to create the royal jelly, and we need to make sure that they're raising a queen from an egg or the right age larva. So I've thought, what if you found a colony that had a frame with like basically just eggs on it? And then that's the only brood frame that you give them. And you make this split, and you put a frame of pollen right next to it of bee bread. You put a frame of honey in there with the adhering bees on that. You have your frame of eggs with the bees that are on that. Obviously, you don't take the queen. And then what you want to do is find a couple more frames of brood, preferably larvae, and then you shake 3 or 4 more frames of bees in there. And keep in mind, some of those are flying back because there's some foragers. And you do that so you have a good population. Now the only thing that they can raise anything off of is those eggs. And I think doing that in spring, when things are ideal, you could do that. Jason Powell, Doghouse again. Exactly. But, boredom is terrible, so it never gets boring around here, even though part of the reason I'm never bored is because I'm in trouble all the time. Hive Life 2024 is on our list. Well, we look forward to seeing you a short pants bee farm. Ooh, I wouldn't have had short pants today. No. Probably got zapped 6 or 7 times today, and more than that yesterday. I got 8 in about 5 seconds yesterday. But I was in a t-shirt and didn't have any smoke, and they had been moved from one yard to the other. I knew better. Thought I'd take a chance, and the gamble did not pay off. The doghouse can be comfy, Jed says. Not around here, it's not. Austin Payne, why did you start beekeeping, and why did y'all decide to turn it into a business? Is it still fun for you? Do you have a different career? Interesting question, but a good one. Do you have a different career? Well, I used to. So basically what I tried to do when I was a teenager, and keep in mind, this is my mindset, is I don't derive fun from fun things as a lot of people do. There's other people like me for sure, but I don't enjoy playing games very much. I just don't. Super competitive. I like building. And so for me, this is enjoyable because we're building a business. There's economics to consider. There's a lot of challenges, and I like that a whole lot. So, however, I struggled early on because I didn't have the experience and the knowledge to be able to be successful. So in my teens, I was doing farmers markets and different things and failing more often than I was succeeding. Early 20s, still failing quite often and having some success, making some money, but not enough to support a family, not even close. And then it got to the point in my mid-20s where I was like, you know what? We're just going to put this off to the side. Let's go make some money so we can learn more. And while we're learning more, I'm going to make money to be able to sock away and build something. So that's what I did. I drove a truck for 6 years, and towards the end of it, the 6th, 7th year, I was part-time and building this and starting the YouTube as well. And a lot of people are curious about this, but we make more money off of bees by a good margin than we do off of YouTube. YouTube does pay, but it's not as much as a lot of people think it does. I mean, it can pay really good, but that's if you have millions of subscribers or getting millions and millions of views. There's people that have had in one video more views than we've had in our entire channel, which is just staggering. But I started beekeeping primarily because I wanted a career outdoors. I like cool things, and bees are very cool. And I like honey quite a bit and all the other things they have to offer. So it's still fun as a business, but I like business. If you don't like business and all the minutia that goes with it and the stress, I don't like the stress, but it's part of it, then you'd hate that. And I don't recommend it lightly. It'd be better to keep it with 10 colonies and have fun. But you can run a small, sideline business. I think that would be a ton of fun. 10 hives, run them at a high level, average 80 pounds a piece and a split a piece, and sell the nukes, and then split them again after the flow in summer. for insurance colonies, and sell those off in spring next year if you have if you have more than what you want. And that would be a good little side hustle right there. You get to have your hobby; it pays for itself, and maybe even if you have a good year, take your spouse on a trip, and then you can justify your existence to that spouse. Yeah, there you go. Something to live by. St. Germain, do you know yet when you and Laurel are going to be doing Nuke Pickups? So yes, it is the 22nd, Chris, and it will be here in Gainsboro. The email should have gone out. We're having some issues with a few people getting them. Be on the lookout. We'll send another flash email out to everybody, but that's still on the 22nd, and we do have some nukes left for anybody who's wondering. But yeah, the 22nd we have a pickup in Gainsboro. I will send an email to you, Chris, to let you know the exact location, preferably early morning. How do you convince your wife you need to spend money on bees, or how do you hide it from her? Oh gosh, backing me in the corner here. This is turning into a wild chat already, and we're just 11 minutes in. So the best answer to that is to start small and be successful quickly. It's easier to justify stuff when you have goods to show. Doghouse again. All right, what material do you use in your smoker? I use all kinds of things. I really like pine needles quite a bit. I've used grass clippings, but they stink. They work really good. So you can let your grass grow a little bit longer and rake that up. And I just don't like the smell of grass clippings. I love the smell of pine needles, but if you don't have pines, it doesn't work very good. You can use wood chips. They get a little too hot, and I also don't like things that are really fine. Like, don't use fine wood chips or sawdust or anything just real fine, because as your smoker breathes, if it breathes a lot of that small particulate matter, it'll clog up the bellows eventually. You can use burlap, like sacks for coffee beans or for potatoes. That works really good. There's a lot of different things that you can use. Tobacco works really, really good. Some people get really upset when I say tobacco works really good. It's a great smoke as far as how it smokes and smolders. You can use lettuce and a lot of other dried things. However, I argue the people that say that I'm going to cause cancer, saying that you can use tobacco, I just wonder what kind of carcinogens are in pine needles. Probably not pretty good if you've ever looked on the inside of a smoker. But it smells so good. It's easier to ask for forgiveness, so just spend and ask later. Yeah, that's Thorn Manufacturing for you right there. So he's basically saying buy a thorn extractor and then tell your wife about it later. That's what that was. Shameless plug. Dave Dwyer, working afternoon stinks. Have to catch up later. Well, thanks for still coming in and helping us out, Dave. I really appreciate that. One of these days, I gotta visit my brother, and we ought to just all catch up. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for helping us out again, Dave. Question, how long do you need to wait to check on a virgin queen hatched from a swarm cell? That's a great question. So let's say that you come into a colony and you want to, you leave it and it is capped. We don't know how long it's been capped. So they cap it on day 6, and it's going to emerge sometime around day 12 from the time, well, not from the time the egg was laid. Let me give me a second here. 6, 7. But my rule of thumb is when we drop queen cells, we're not going to get into that colony for 24 days. There's no reason to, because when we come back, we could come back earlier, a little bit earlier, but there's just no reason to. We come back on day 24 or 25 days later, and we either have a queen or we don't at that point. And so if we drop 100 cells and we come back and only 80 of them took, then the 20 of them are instantly counted as no good, and we will double check that we don't see a virgin running around, but we will just combine them back with the other colonies and be done with it. It's all a percentage thing. So give it a little over 3 weeks from the time you saw that. It's not going to hurt anything to wait, but then once you get into it, if there is no queen, like 24 days later, you don't have one. So, combine back with another colony, and you can make a split again later if you'd like to. Hey, Cayman, look forward to picking up my nukes from you soon. Yeah, we've got some good ones. That's what I was doing all day, is going through them and seeing where they're at. I actually have a couple that are a little bit too big, so I was having to pull them back, but they're looking really good. Queens are laying hard, and making some more up today as well, dropping some queen cells. And I'm going to have more nukes than I anticipated this year, but it's a good problem to have. Looking forward to getting you some good bees ready to work. If you only want to raise 1 or 2 queens, would you just add a frame of eggs to a nuke, or would you try grafting? Well, if I just wanted 1 or 2 queens and it was springtime, yeah, you could just throw them in a nuke, but there needs to be a good population of bees, and there needs to be plenty of nutrition, tons of nutrition. So make sure there's plenty of bees, plenty of nutrition, and they're only, you could even take a marker and mark around the area of eggs if you had to. Just make sure that they're raising it from the eggs and not a larvae that is 3 or 4 days old and it's already been fed some worker jelly, and then it has some of the blockers in there so they won't develop properly. Dave, thanks for coming on again. Cayman, my question is, how early should I make the move to requeen? I'm almost exactly the temperature zone that you are here in Arkansas. I don't want to pull the trigger too early. So, Dave, maybe you can elaborate slightly. Are you requeening because it's a hot hive, or the hive stinks, or because you want to just keep your queens fresh? It should be plenty early enough to get some queens in Arkansas, as far as make good queens or introduce good queens, whatever it is. This has been an early year. I've maybe seen it this early one other time. It's been very impressive, and the weather is cooperating so far really good, knock on wood, and I'm hoping that we continue to get this good weather, because right now it looks like the black locust and tulip poplar might just do well. All right, so Dave Round says not laying well, so pull the trigger. Why wait? It's warm enough. It's a great time of the year for requeening. Plenty of resources, plenty of drones. Let them have it. So I'll probably do this in a video if I can find time for it. It's very difficult to find time for videos right now. However, that really hot hive, for those of you that saw that short video where I had a hive that was just peppering me, and the queen was just laying wonderful patterns, but the offspring, they're just terrible, and I don't want that in my genetics, because it'll spread. And so I took her out about a week ago, and I came back today, and I wanted to do some more grafting, so I went in there and saw several queen cells, and they have a massive population. And so I did a couple things, and it's going to be quite fun, hopefully, is I took this massive colony that really needs 2 deeps and a couple medium supers right now for this time of the year, minimum of space. And so I shrank them down to single brood. All the brood went down below. There's an excluder, and then I put comb honey supers, and I'm hoping to do really well with that this year. So they have no queen, so they can't swarm. I went in today and cut all the cells out, so now they can't even raise a queen. Everything's too old. So there's this massive population. They cannot create a queen at this point. They're hopelessly queenless. They're not even thinking about swarming, but they're wanting to raise a queen and have this big new population with all kinds of nutrition. So my plan was to just drop a different queen cell in there, requeen it, and then as she comes back and lays, and she's so new, they won't want to swarm. Her pheromones will be too strong, and they'll backfill that brood nest, but since they'll have space above, they will force all that up and then let her lay. But then I thought, well, they're so strong, why not graft into it? So that's what I did today. I grafted 45 cells into it from one of our breeder queens, and then I did stack the comb honey shallow frames with just a 1-inch strip like Gus Mitchell does on his videos. And hopefully we'll get some comb honey, and also hopefully we'll get some good queens out of this colony. And after I probably do 2 rounds of queens or so, they'll get a little bit long and the tooth won't raise queens as good. I'll just leave one really good cell, and hopefully she'll come back and fix it, and we'll get comb honey, and that'll be fun. Maybe bring some of that to Hive Life. Did you kill the drones in that hot hive to stop the spread of those genetics to other hives? I did not. I'm not really raising queens in this yard. It's in mass, so the little colonies are miles and miles away. Now they could go and mate with somebody else's bees or whatever, but I didn't take any extra time to do that. All right. Is there a squish video coming soon? I was so disappointed you let her live last time. Well, Thomas, most people aren't super excited to see a queen killed on YouTube. I don't know what YouTube would do. Sometimes they censor you for killing things on there and all that kind of stuff. But not everybody has the same disposition. Me, I'm the type of guy that doesn't want to see anything suffer, but has no problem with taking something out and eating it. Not a queen. There's just not enough meat on it. But yeah, so I don't typically put that in videos. And there's a lot of kids that watch my stuff too, so I try to be really careful. Not all kids are raised like mine that are used to seeing that kind of thing. Hey, Cayman, what flowers or trees do you typically look for to signal the main honey flow / swarming? Cody Walker. So the first thing is there's multiple things to the swarm tendency. The first one is the first big push of, there's a little premature swarming, like the big ones or colonies that really have aggressive tendencies. That'll be even prior to any nectar of significance coming in. But there will be a lot of pollen, which can back things up. Colonies just get to a certain size, and a lot of them just want to reproduce. It's programmed into them. And then if you're feeding a little bit too, and that's where it's really a delicate balance. A lot of people, they either get bees or they overwinter bees, and some people don't feed enough, some feed too much. And this time of the year, it's especially in a lot of places, it's really a delicate balance, because literally you could be feeding 1 week to keep them alive, and then the next week they filled half a medium. It just turns on like that. So there can be a little premature swarming, but then when that first swarm nectar hits, that's when the biggest swarm push of the year is. If you can get them past that, it's not that they won't swarm, but that's the hardest one to get over. Most people, they don't know how to deal with that, and they don't have the combs to deal with it either, or they don't pull the bees back prior to getting to that point. We've been pulling brood since the first week of March and equalizing stuff around as well. Sharing brood from one colony to the other. So what flowers I look for and what trees, I am looking for the main push to be autumn olive, red bud, dogwood. It's not like dogwood produces a lot, but it's kind of a signal. Black locust is going to be a big one, and blackberry blossom can be just copious around here. That's a great flow for us. So anyways, but yeah, that's kind of the things that we have around here. Is there any evidence that music playing by the hive helps honey production? I have never tried it. However, it would bring a bunch of joy to me to see a banjo player play a banjo next to one of my hottest hives. That would be entertaining. As long as I can film it, I'm all for it. So tips on building up a weak hive that just got slimed. Well, I don't know how big this colony is. It's fairly weak is what it sounds like. Do you have spare brood? So, if you have 10 colonies or 3 colonies or whatever, and they're strong and you can afford to pull a little bit from those, and the queen's good, don't waste good resources on something that doesn't have a lot of potential. But you could give some emerging brood from those colonies, and that would be the best thing, is to give some. You could even shake some nurse bees in there. That would be wonderful to get some bodies and some manpower in there to protect everything. And then you could put some emerging brood, so as that's emerging, that's also able to keep the area safe. But colonies that just got slimed, that's kind of strange. Usually when they get slimed, they're so weak it's difficult to do much with them, and we don't try to fix them. If it's just a little bit slimed, though, you take the frames out. So some people will ask this too, so kind of going on parallel with that, is if you get a little bit of damage from small hive beetles, they've run up them and they've slimed it. It's very repulsive to bees and they won't want to use it, and some people just burn them. But sometimes those combs really haven't suffered hardly any damage at all, but the smell, the bees don't like it. You can take a hose and just hose them down and rinse that off, and once you rinse that off, I find that the bees work those actually quite good. So Vanderpool Farm says, our understanding is that a queen will never get better. If she is laying poorly or failing, she will only get worse. Replace her. And I totally agree with that. And this is one of the lessons that's hard to learn when you only have a hive or two and you're new. It takes some time and more bee time in the hives. And after a while, you start seeing these queens, and you're like, man, what a champ. What a pattern. What production. And you see this one. You see that one doing it. You see this one. And all of a sudden, these two are, why? The nutrition's the same. They're in the same location. Why in the world is this one not performing as well? And sometimes it could be like high mite loads or something else impacting it. But a lot of times, more often than people realize, the queen just is old or has something that has happened, and she's just not getting it done. And that's why I really encourage all beekeepers that want to be successful. Numbers. It's a numbers game. This is agriculture. You're going to lose bees. Going to happen. If you do a really good job, maybe it's only a few. Some years, maybe nothing at all. But it's always good to have a backup. So if you want to have 3 hives for honey production, have 2 nukes. Fresh queens from that year. If one of those big ones goes down, plug it in. And you don't have to wait. There's no emergency. You're in good shape. It's actually better because now you have all this brood you can plug in with the queen. It's just the way to do it. Cayman, did you get my email pics? Can you see them clearly? So you did send it to me, and Terry, I saw them on my phone just a little bit. I didn't have a chance to look through all of them yet. It's like 12-hour days right now, mostly outside almost the entire time, and I will get around to it. I'm still needing to get back to somebody from Africa. Someone's asking me to speak in the UK. I'm probably going to tell them no. I told someone that I wasn't going to speak in Canada recently, like the week before. I got to get back with someone about Florida wanting me to speak. And then there's Hive Life stuff, and it's just. And I'm trying not to make excuses, but if you guys can't get a hold of me, it's nothing personal. There needs to be 3 of me, and there's not. How often do you recommend checking a hive? Great question. So this time of the year, I would like to get in every week. Inspections don't have to be long, Royal. They can be quite short, and depending on the time of the year, you'll have to adjust kind of what you're looking for. This time of the year in Tennessee, I don't want to see swarm cells, and a lot of it depends on the size of the colony. Are we introducing a package? Well, a package, I want to make sure that they are drawing new comb. If I don't have any combs, I want to make sure they have enough food. And a good colony never needs to have less than a couple frames of food. Now, when they're brand new, it's a little bit different, but you're consistently feeding them. And then we're also watching the environment a little bit and seeing, are the bees bringing in food of their own? So this time of year is a very dynamic, busy year in Tennessee where we have all kinds of change happening very rapidly. So getting in once a week, I think, is important. However, it doesn't have to be a long inspection. Get in there. Oh, great pattern. Up there's some eggs, plenty of food, and do they need a little bit more space? Do they need a little bit more food? What do they need? And it could be super short. In summer, it's a little bit more laid back to a degree. Obviously, there are summer jobs, but with the robbing season that we have, I recommend every other week. We have to keep in mind bees don't live very long, 6, 7 weeks, something like that. If the nutrition's not good, they're not even living that long. They're not, so 5, 6 weeks. It's hard to know, but it's quite a bit less in summer with a lack of nutrition. And what that means is there's a lot of turnaround. So if you lose a queen and you don't check back for a month, by the time you get to it, you're in the 11th hour and you haven't even ordered a queen or done anything yet. So I think every other week is good. If you have 5 hives, get into them. And this is a great way, doing this consistently, to know what you need to be seeing. Is all right, we're into our colonies. It's a double deep hive. What do I want to see? I want to see in a double deep hive, 3 frames worth of honey or sugar syrup minimum. I want to see eggs. I want to see decent patterns. I want to see clean bees. And I want to see a halfway decent population. And then if I'm feeding them, which I do throughout the summer, are they taking their feed properly like the rest of them? And if one is not, something is wrong. Sometimes it's just a requeen. Sometimes the hive will be really aggressive or won't eat their food properly like the rest of them, and we'll find that they're going through a requeen. They're superseding. And if the queen comes back and she starts laying, they start eating good, and they're not typically as aggressive anymore. So, there's a lot of little things that through experience and time you will see, but in summer, 2 weeks, and then going more towards winter prep, probably around 2 weeks as well. It doesn't have to be a long inspection. Don't take 20 minutes in there. 5 minutes. Or 3 if you're really good. Kevin Rowland. Thanks, Kevin, for helping us out again. Remember, life is a marathon, not a sprint. Pace yourself. Keep up the great work. I appreciate it, Kevin. I'm a victim of my own ambition. And I kind of like it, and I kind of hate it. But also, there's a lot of big concerns for me. Is like with hive life, people contacting me from Africa, Canada, all over the world now, and they're wanting to come. And I don't want to be the guy that tells 2,000 people they can't come this year. And it's going to be a little interesting. And it's not my nature to tell people no, but I'm having to get better at it. As a new beekeeper, how do I get them to draw out new comb and not just backfill the brood nest? So a great queen is the number one thing that you need to draw comb. If she's laying good patterns, she forces the bees to draw comb. And through research, we know that a well-mated queen produces 30% more comb in a season off the same resources and location as one that's not mated quite as good. So the queen is really important to this. She, as soon as a spot is available and drawn, even not even fully drawn, halfway drawn, she'll drop an egg in it. And when those bees come over with some nectar and they're like, where am I going to stick this? There's eggs over here, doggone it. And so it forces them to have to draw more comb. So queen's number one. We also have to have a healthy population. Bees thrive on balance. We need stages. Nurse bees don't draw combs. And they're in the stage of making jellies and feeding the young. And when they get older, they'll be able to produce wax scales. So we have to have a balanced colony to be able to maintain the brood, expand, and all of these different things. And that's why when you make splits, you always make sure there's plenty of bees. So if you're trying to protect 4 frames of brood and resources, let's say there's 2 frames of brood, it's a small split, 2 frames of brood, a frame of pollen, a frame of honey. That means all the adhering bees that were on those frames need to go in that box, and then I'd shake a minimum of 2 frames in there from the big hive, because they have plenty of bees. Shake them in there, because we're going to lose some, and there needs to be bee coverage. And I prefer to have more than just a little bit. I want to have excess bees in that split, so they not only can go on those 4 frames, they can expand onto the others. And we have good protectors now from small hive beetles and wax moths, we also have extra bees to be able to draw out things as well. So the balance is really important. You can't draw good combs with a poor queen. Now, what you can do to draw out new combs and not fill the brood nest out, if it's a great queen, she should force things up, but you got to stay far enough ahead of them. So if you get a package or a nuke and they are covering around 7 frames and they're drawing that out, go ahead and stick another box on. Unless it's going to be like a high of 30 degrees Fahrenheit, just go ahead and stick another box of foundations on and pull up a frame of eggs or larvae directly above where the brood is. So we want that brood underneath and that heat going right up into that. That's going to help them draw it out. It's also that heat's going to help warm them up quite a bit. And they don't have to go out. Bees are better about going up and drawing combs than they are about going out to the sides anyways. And then once they've gone up there and started drawing that out, you can take some of those frames of brood or resources and put them down below, take some of the foundations they hadn't finished below, pull them back up, and it's a lot of work. Combs can be, especially when you have a strong honey flow, it can be difficult. If you're wanting to, if you have to feed your bees and you're trying to draw, and they already have a decent bit of resources, don't feed 1-to-1. Feed half a pound of sugar to 1 pound of water. So you're not adding as much bulk in there. It condenses down a lot faster, but you're still stimulating them. Some of the best time to draw combs nowadays, for me, is after my honey flow's over. My flow's done by the end of June. These powerful colonies get all the honey super stripped. There's not enough space. Use those old forager bees to draw some new combs. And it's easier this time of the year because they're not wanting to swarm, because when the honey flows over, there's not the natural nectar coming in, and there's not a diverse amount of pollens either. And so there's very little chance of plugging them up unless I'm just really stupid with the feed. And I can just feed very thin syrup, and I'll draw out a box or two. And so I know this really doesn't give you an easy answer, but there is not really an easy answer to your question. So that's the best I got. And Chris, I know I'm not supposed to focus on a question that long, but I can't help it. Paul Martins, hey, Paul, thanks for coming on again. Thanks for helping us out. Had 2 deadouts, looked like American foul brood. Tested them twice, negative. Any thoughts? So have you tested them? I know, a lot of people hate this, but have you tested them for Varroa? I'd like to see if there's an alcohol wash on there, because there are viruses that we don't fully understand. There's a lot of stressors, too, to brood. Some virus, like I've seen some colonies that had such high viruses that they're just the nastiest looking brood in there. And it's just different stages. Some of them are dying at the pupa stage. Some of them are dying as larvae. It's all kinds of stuff. Chris just texts me, yappity yap. Don't talk back. It's probably too old for you, Chris. But yeah, I would be interested to see the mite loads on that. Have you done a European foul brood test on that? Because there's different strains of that. I have not really had any issues like that in a long time. But we really work on a lot of things that I think help with that quite a bit. But let me know, Paul. I would really appreciate if you find out what that is, knowing, because I could always learn a little bit more. But viruses will give you some nasty-looking larvae. Hey, Cayman, here in Middle Tennessee, do you think the temperatures are safe enough to start my capped queen cell nukes and Jester nuke boxes? Oh, yeah. Just make sure there's enough bee coverage. So here's an interesting story, Brady James, or James Brady, whichever way that goes. So I had a friend of mine who gave me 5 Hawaiian queens. So Zach gave me 5 queens, and I landed February. It was the last day of February. And so that's quite a bit early, and it was not a warm year like this year was. I went into some strong colonies, though, and they still had 14 frames of bees, and I took a frame of brood, shook 2 frames of bees, and then I went to several other colonies and did that until I had what I wanted, and I had 1 good frame of brood, and I definitely had food. You have to have direct food contact that time of the year. They burn through a lot. But I had plenty of manpower, and I put that queen right down in there. Queen cell works the same, right? Put it down there in the core of that. They all took, they all laid, they all did well. And the high on the day I was doing that was 39 degrees Fahrenheit, and it got down into the 20s. So if you've got good healthy bees and enough of them, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff. So you should be good this time of the year. Tips for strong hives and massive honey crops. Oh, got to have a great queen, definitely. And keeping the hive together is part of the trick. So obviously our thing that we say is great queens, dead mites, and good nutrition are what get you to the point of having a strong hive and potentially getting that massive honey crop. But then the fourth thing that we don't say is then what do you do with swarming? Combs are king. I mean, you got to have it. And if you don't, it's a lot trickier to be able to deal with that. So like I said earlier, maybe you weren't here for that, and that's fine because this only slightly pertains to what you're asking. That colony that had a really bad queen that just made all kinds of offspring. She was a great layer, but they had a terrible disposition, so I killed her. And this massive population, they were fixing to want to swarm anyways. They already were starting to make some cells, so I took her out. I smashed all the cells, came back 7 days later, smashed all of the queen cells again, so now they can't raise their own. And this is something that Eugene Killian wrote in his book, Honey in the Comb. If you're wanting to be really successful at making honey or comb honey, I think this is a good book to read. They focus more on comb honey, but if you can make comb honey, you can definitely make extracted honey. It's a lot harder. And so I really like their book and their method. And what they would do is build these massive colonies, and they get to about the point where they were swarming, and they would take the queen out, and then they would come back X amount of days later. They would cut the cells out, and they would basically get the swarm stimuli out of the bees, and they're like, oh my goodness, we're hopelessly queenless. What are we going to do? And they're not thinking about swarming at that point. It's all about controlling the stimuli. Then they brought their own queen cells from the genetics that they wanted. And back then, before Varroa, they were breeding queens with genetics that made dry cappings. So whenever you guys look at some honey frames this year, you'll see some that are nice and white capped and dry looking, and some that are wet capped. The honey is still the same, but sometimes the bees will do one or the other, and you can actually select for that. And they did back then because they were comb honey producers. So they would put that queen cell in there, and then when she would come back, since she was so fresh and mated well and good pheromones, she would just start laying like crazy, and then push all of the nectar that they had brought into that bottom box up into those comb honey supers, and they were just phenomenal at making comb honey. So Honey in the Comb by Eugene Killian, it's one of my favorite books, but it's definitely more of a serious veteran to advanced type book, I would think. It's a good read either way. But it's all about managing the swarming. What you could do, is what I've been doing, is cut the bees back to about 4 frames of brood and put them in a single brood chamber. But you cut them back a lot. And some people are like, well, you lose some of your honey crop, Cam. Well, sure, I lose a little bit of the early flow, but it really retards swarming for the rest of my honey flow season. And I get to pull all that brood off, and I make splits, and I can sell those. And so if I do that just on 100 hives, and I can sell a nuke a piece, well, that's $195 is what they are this year. And then I'll at least make 80 pounds off of each one of those colonies because they're still quite strong. And all the honey goes into the supers because they're single brood management. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, but it's all about being able to manipulate the bees to... You can't force them to do something, like if they're wanting to do something, but if you can get them to change their mind and influence them, well, then you're set. Rylan, thank you so much for coming on again, and thanks for the donation. How big was your biggest honey harvest, and how did you manage it? So not last year, but the year before was the biggest one that we ever had. We had colonies that had 150 pounds of honey that we were pulling off. It was very normal to have 100 pounds on a colony. I went into a yard of 40 colonies and had like 4,000 something pounds of honey just in that yard. It was a great year. That's not normal. We'll get those every now and then, maybe twice in a decade. But that was everything lined up. And we had the combs to do it. And we did a good job. We do single brood management, and you got to realize that we take everything, and I mean everything. So some people call it unethical. I say it's just fine. So we pull the excluders when we're done. We put on some foundations, and we feed them, and we draw those out. We feed and we feed and we feed, and it actually helps keep the bees healthier in the summer because as they're being fed that syrup, they're making hydrogen peroxide. They are being more hygienic. As they're being fed, bees are better about cleaning themselves in the colony when they're being fed, or getting nectar, either way. And I get more comb, and I get more honey. And, I can get sugar for 40-something cents a pound. And, honey, I'm only getting like $6 a pound, but a lot of people, charge $12-15 these days. So it makes a lot of business sense to do that. So, that's what we're doing. No European foul brood tests and no mite load tests. We had bad robbing and a lot of going through winter. It was our second year and did a lot of stuff wrong. Well, no problems, Paul. Trust me. We have done that before, I guarantee you. And I've lost 80% of my operation one time and very close to that another time. And it wasn't like 2 or 3 hives. It was like 50, 40 range, and it's not fun. Very expensive, but you'll get there. It's part of the process, and robbing is a rough time of the year. Summer is the toughest season in Tennessee and in a lot of areas. A lot of the pests are at their peak, not just in the hive, but the pests outside of the hive. If you can conquer July, late July, August, and all of September, if you're a stellar beekeeper in those months in Tennessee, you're going to be in a great spot for the honey flow. But that's when most people get burned out is August and early September, and they're busy, and that neglect is what costs you your honey flow next year typically. Eddie Eve, 2 questions. What makes a hive smell bad? No obvious signs of disease, and notice ticks crawling up a hive. I'd rather take stings than tick bites. What deters them? Well, there are some sprays for them. Primarily, they're crawling up from your boots up to your pant leg, and so there are some sprays. Some essential oils work really good. There's a blend of the stuff. It might aggravate the bees a little bit if it's real strong, but like putting that around your boots, because that's a lot of times where they'll get onto you, and it'll deter them from crawling up in the first place. But we keep our bee yards weeded and mowed as best as we can, because that helps more than anything, I think. And having chickens does a really good job. What makes a hive smell bad? Well, sometimes nectar will. Some nectars don't smell very good. So it could be nectar. If it's something that persists long term, are you seeing any brood in there that looks funky? So you say no obvious signs of disease, so probably not that. It could be nectar. I don't know. Let me know what you find out, Eddie. All right, Chris, ECP. Came in doing splits tomorrow. I was successful with a March emergency cell split. I have never raised a queen that came back this early mated. It's an early year. I'm glad to hear that it worked out for you. We were grafting queens and dropping nukes and cells and doing things that we just, at times of the year, we've never done before. It's just beekeeping for you. We've had years where we're 2 weeks. No. I've had weeks, years where we are 3 to 4 weeks behind where we're at now. So it's just hang on for dear life. But thanks for helping us out again, Chris, and good luck with your splits. I'm looking forward to hearing your success from them. Hey, Cayman, I'm having trouble with a cutout trying to join their combs together from frame to frame. How do I fix this without taking too much resources from them? by replacing the combs completely. Okay, so that's one thing I'm not like a super expert at is cutouts. I've probably done 5 in my life, and correctly maybe 1, maybe 2. I hate doing cutouts. I'm not picking on you. I really have a lot of respect and enjoy seeing other people do it, and somebody's got to do it. But it just really wasn't my thing. So you're having trouble joining their combs together from frame to frame. Have you tried? There's some rubber bands that work pretty good. Big rubber bands that people use, string, and all that kind of stuff. Basically, I only focus on the brood. Good frames of brood. Make sure the comb orientation is proper and not sideways or anything like that, or upside down, even worse. You'll see that the cells go up if you don't already know. Cells, and for those of you who don't know, bees make the cells to where they angle up. Just slightly, but they do. They angle up. But basically, I just get a couple good frames of brood if I can, try to save the brood, and outside of that, scrap everything else. Just melt it down. Don't worry about the resources. Feed them some sugar syrup, and then just shake the bees on that brood. And so I think that's a lot better. That's in my opinion. So if you have like 3 frames of brood that you salvage, that you can get to stay in those frames, but you have like 8 frames of bees, well, that's all right. Just put some foundations next to it or some other combs that you have. And then you have all this bullying manpower that can protect that. Some of the issues I see with cutouts is people try to save a lot of stuff, and it's a stressful time, weakens the colony, and they save all the resources, and there's not enough bees because some of the forager bees stayed back, and small hive beetles are able to take over. So definitely better to have too many bees for resource level. Only 267 days until hive life. Yeehaw. Oh, gosh, Stan, don't remind me. I'm looking forward to it to a degree, but the workload. It was fun, though. It was fun. It's going to be even better this year. After marking a new really good queen, when I released her from the marking tube, I saw a worker try to sting her. A week later, she was gone, and they were making new queen cells. Thoughts? Interesting. That can happen. I've heard of that happen. I've never seen that before. After marking a new, really good queen. So she was laying good and she was new. I don't know. That should not happen like that. Are you using any crazy off-brand marker or something like that? That's strange. But weird things happen in the bee yard. And you never know. There's got to be a reason for it. But unfortunately, it's very hard to detect some of those smaller things. Lindsay Homestead Farm, we are still trying to rest up from last hive life. Exactly. So Jeremy Lindsay helps us out with it, does a lot of the coordinating for the trade show and stuff like that, helping the vendors out. And he walked over 40 miles during hive life, according to his device on his watch. I reviewed an older video about wax dipping hive bodies. Did you ever do the test of dipping and then painting with latex versus oil-based paint? I've never had a chance to try that, Wade. It is definitely best in my mind right now to go with oil-based paint, because everybody I know who does this, and I know about 8 people who paint after wax dipping, they all use oil-based paint. I would be very interested to see latex afterwards. I imagine that there's probably a reason why those guys are using oil-based paint, because nobody likes using oil-based paint. At least I wouldn't think so. I mean, it's terrible to clean up and all that kind of stuff. However, it works really good if you're going to do that with the wax dipping. Those boxes should be around for like 50 years. Starting over new. In the past, all my hives were cutouts, but I'm trying buying a Nuke this time. Supposed to pick them up the 22nd. I'm still kind of new to beekeeping. Is there anything I need to do different with the Nuke? Not particularly. It should be a good nucleus colony. And you said 22nd, so are you getting them from me? That's what I'd like to know. If not, that's fine. I'm just curious. And you should, the nice thing about a nuke, it should be already healthy. The beekeeper you get it from should already have a good laying queen in there. There should be at least 3 frames of brood. 3 good frames of brood. Now, any more than that, and you're starting to get too big, it's possible, but you definitely don't want like 4 slabs of brood. Nukes can overheat during transport. And then resources, you just plug them in the center, and then you put your foundations next to it, and if you have some combs, put that above. But there's really not much difference in taking care of it. The best difference is the fact that your combs typically are a lot straighter. But that's about it. So, Chris, there's one by Austin Payne on here. Cayman for president. Yeah. I think I'd probably have a heart attack within 8 years, but those would be some interesting 8 years. And I think I can do better than we've had in a while. So that's just my opinion. But it doesn't take much, though. I mean, it doesn't take much. Go back to 1776 and run it like a free market and let the American people do what they do best. All right, enough about that. Austin Payne, is it worth the investment to buy the tools to streamline the process to make boxes if you plan to turn it into a bee business, or can you post a link for a good company to buy shipped bulk cheap boxes? Woo, okay. So, you can build them yourself, but there's a balance. So I used to build all my own boxes and still build some of my stuff like lids and pallets and stuff like that, but how busy are you? I mean, do you have free time to do this? And if you do, that's awesome. But if it's cutting into work and it's costing you money there or whatever, it's not worth it. So, it's a trade-off. Most of the guys that I know who are commercial that are building their own boxes have employees, and what they need is something to keep them busy during the winter. So they don't make money or save big money building their own boxes or assembling boxes and doing that themselves, but what they save doing that money can go to pay for their employees in the winter and keep them busy. So a lot of them do just that. Bob Benny, a lot of those guys. But I don't have employees. You don't have any employees. So you got to figure out what your time's worth. As far as locations to pick up boxes in bulk, I know Miller Bee Supply in North Carolina occasionally has some bulk sales. There's some Amish folks. Oh, there's various sales around. Hive Life is really a great one. I don't know if you've heard of that. The girl that runs that, boy, amazing. And there's some good deals there. But the Amish are usually pretty good, and it depends on how many boxes you want. A lot of times, if you call a company and ask, especially during the off season, they're a lot more interested in working with you on a price versus right now where they can't get stuff out the door fast enough. Ooh, okay. You got my vote. All right, 1 vote. And I appreciate that. Okay, whoa, I'm way behind on these questions. Way behind. Oh my goodness, came and trying to get out of the doghouse on the same night. Hey, I'm really skilled in both ways. I can get in the doghouse, I can get out of the doghouse. It's part of my thing. It keeps it very interesting. I enjoy it. So Terry Richards says he buys unassembled $10 a box. Wow, there's no way I'd build a box if I can get it unassembled for $10 a box. All that kind of stuff. Hey, you're welcome, Austin. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for helping us out. Evening, Mr. Reynolds. Good to see you out of that full suit. It's good to be out of that full suit. My bee suits get a workout. I have been in jackets or suits. Let's see. Today is Friday. Oh, I've been in a bee suit 45 to 50 hours, I'd say, so far this week. And not a full suit necessarily sometimes, but mostly a jacket. And I will be in the bees all day tomorrow. And at the way things are going, probably midday Saturday, sometime after 1:30 or so. Oh boy, not what I'd like to be doing. I mean, I enjoy bees, but gosh, enough's enough. Got to keep up. Got to keep up. Came and I had a hive swarm. Ended up being able to catch it when I got home. I was watching them in the clutch, and there were bees doing a waggle dance. Would that be for resources or for a new home? It could be for either one. So the waggle dance is what sometimes you'll see when the colonies swarm. There are bees that are attracted to it that have pollen baskets and sometimes nectar, and they follow that queen in that swarm. But they're going out and they're getting resources, and I'll just take off with this swarm. But then when they settle down and it clusters up, they're still doing their waggle dance, letting everybody else know where there's pollen or something to be had. So it's another one of those things where I'd have no way of telling you how to tell if they're looking for a location or if that's just a bee going, hey, there's a bunch of dandelions over here. Hey, Scott K., thanks so much for saying that. Appreciate it. Anita Setter, hi all. Going through my dead outs today and figured they starved, but what I noticed is mold on the top of the frames. Thoughts? I live in western Wisconsin and do not do upper entrances. Good question. So we get a lot of moisture here in Tennessee. Ooh, that feels a lot better. My lower back is just shot right now. And the strong colonies that we have that overwinter still, we'll get a little bit of mold on the edge combs where the condensation is going through and it goes to the sides of the walls, and you get a little bit in there. I don't think that you can avoid getting mold in a wet climate. Even if you had an upper entrance, I've had upper entrances, you still get some of that down here. And now, of course, we're in a totally different climate than you. The best thing I've seen to prevent mold and water issues in Tennessee is not an upper entrance. It's not having an upper entrance. It's having a really strong cluster of bees and being able to push that off. Now, again, if we had 4 to 5 months of winter, totally different situation. But it's kind of a twofold thing, because if you're up north and you're in a wet part of the north, you'd be concerned about moisture issues building up with that much condensation. But then again, having an upper entrance also causes your bees to burn more fuel because they're losing heat through that upper entrance as well. And there are beekeepers all over the north that don't run upper entrances, and there are beekeepers who say that if you don't do it, you're a moron. So you have to do it here. I've never been up north with keeping bees, and I probably never will be. But I wish I had that experience. I would love to get to try that out. But the main thing is your thoughts. Just try to throw a little bit more food to them in during the fall flow. Maybe you take honey for the fall flow. Some people can. I don't, and I actually will start feeding during the fall flow. And I don't care. It's warm. Bees will take it. Let's get them up to weight. In your area, I would think that you'd have to have a deep box of food for a good colony, a good cluster. So definitely a good deep box of food. Or 2 mediums or something like that. Sorry to hear that, though, Anita, and keep me posted on how things are going. I hope to hear some good things. No more doghouse around here. My bride says if I get out of line, it's under the beehives. Well, mine's one of those that, she's got a gun that, sits in the corner, and I know, and she knows that if I ever go too far, then she'll aerate me a little bit. When a queen is expired, how long before introducing a new mated queen? So when a queen gets old or whatever, you can introduce it immediately. So typically, if I go into a colony, I'm like, okay, this queen's got to go, and I already have a queen. I will kill that queen immediately, and I will take that queen, and I will just introduce it right away. It's not like it's like, oh, here you go into a new colony. It's through a cage, and there's going to be candy on that plug. And actually, a lot of times what I will do is I'll put her next to brood. Emerging brood would be preferable, what we like is those emerging bees and as many nurse bees as possible to be around her, because they are very friendly and easygoing, and we want them to, get up close to the queen and feed her and take care of her. And we also want them to get some of her mandibular pheromone and be ambassadors for that queen as well. So putting queen placement, I think, is important. Definitely don't want to put it far away from the young bees and the brood. And that's why when we make our splits, we typically don't have any forager bees at all. When I can help it, we just take them to a new location, and it's just all young bees. It's a perfect environment for a queen to get accepted. But introduce them right away. But you can do a slow release. You can have a cork in the cage and leave them in. Leave her in that area for a day or two if you'd like to. But personally, I add a little bit of extra candy on the end. I actually want a longer release, so I'll use a JZBZ. I don't think I've got one up here with me. Oh, yep, I do. So here's a JZBZ. I make my own queen candy. So that's 2 pounds of powdered sugar to 1 cup of honey. Don't use store-bought honey, though. It's probably rice syrup. And if it is somebody else's honey, it could have disease. But anyway, so I take that and I fill it all the way up, and then I'll make a ball of the candy as well and put it all the way out to here. I'm not in any rush. If that buys me an extra day or two, I'm happy by that, because I'm not in a rush. But that's kind of how I introduce queen. Well, thanks Vanderpool Farms. We try to do a good job on our queen introduction advice. I'd like for one of these days you come onto the YouTube channel and talk to us a little bit about that yourself, Harry. I know you have a plethora of spare time this time of the year, but one of these days I want you to get on here and help me out. Not to put you on the spot or anything. What's the best practice for condensing double deeps to singles for honey production? Thanks for all you guys do to help us beekeepers. Thanks for helping us out. And so there's a couple different ways to go about it. Ian has some good videos on it. Gus Mitchell down in the Memphis Delta area is the one that taught me about it. And he's the one that coaxed me into doing excluders. He told me for multiple years, this will work, Cam. I'm like, you're full of it. That won't work here. That won't work here. Well, look who's using it now. I was talking to him about this, I believe it was yesterday, and he cuts his back to 3 good frames of brood. So if you had 2 solid frames of brood, and then maybe like a half a frame and a half a frame, that would still constitute as 3 frames of brood. And so he cuts them back to 3 frames of brood. They stay in the original location with all the forager bees, and he does that like right around now, and puts an excluder on, stacks honey supers, and then you cut them back so much, the swarming issue shouldn't be that big of a deal. Now, will you get quite as big of honey crops that way? Maybe not. Gus is of a mind that, since the bees are not at all in the mindset of swarming because they've been cut back so much, they redouble their efforts on gathering honey, and they're actually still really good at bringing in a good crop. I've really enjoyed single brood management quite a bit, and since you pull all the honey down to that single, you're able to get a lot more. If you have a double deep box, they can have so much honey tied up in there. That second deep box, oh gosh, they can be brood up in there, but there also can be like 30 to 40 pounds of honey as well. So now if you're able to recapture all of that, an extra 30 pounds, that works out pretty good. So the best thing is to know when to cut, how far to cut them back, and when to do it. And I think you're in Kentucky, Cobra Strike. So honestly, right about now, I mean, at the start of the flow, you want to get them before they actually are swarming on you, though. So you have to really pay attention. This is the time of the year I'm in colonies. Try to be in them every week if I can, until we get them to that point where we feel like we're out of the woods. Tar Heel Beekeeper. Yes, real quick. I'll get to Steve Amos first. Steve, jumping around on you, Chris. Steve Amos, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Thanks to your video, I picked up the instant VAP. How soon after having a swarm should I hit them with the OA? So a lot depends on, well, I want to see them commit. I don't want to get them in and then hit them within 2 days. We have to realize that there's a couple situations. Is it a laying queen? And if so, it's probably going to take her a couple days before she's starting to fire on all 4 cylinders because she's slimmed down so much. And then it could be a virgin swarm. So there's a difference in how long it's going to take. But let's say that the queen takes 2 days before she lays the first couple of eggs. It's going to take 9 days for that brood to get capped. So you have about 11 to 12 days before they're even going to cap any brood at the earliest. So that's after I hived a swarm, I would probably come back on day 10. What are they doing? Is she laying? Are they drawing some comb? Are they putting nectar and pollen into stuff? If they're committed, this is their hive then. Gas those mites at that point. Let them have it. Appreciate it, Steve. And the Instant VAP is an awesome vaporizer. It is very well made. I love that thing. So much so that Laurel said she wanted one for her, so I've got one for each of us. And boy, the work goes really fast that way. And I like not having to fool with any darn cords. Tar Heel Beekeeper, Randy, thank you. We appreciate you guys helping us out. The bee community is something that means a ton to me, and I wish I could do more. We will be able to do more as we get more manpower, and it's happening. It's just there's a lot of slow processes, between running the conference and YouTube and trying to figure out taxes and how to pay employees and manage all of this stuff. I'm having to learn all the time, and I wish I could learn faster. I'm doing the best that I can, but I appreciate you saying that. I know you're not asking more of me, but I feel like I could do a lot more if I was a little bit smarter. But we are ready to bring Hive Life to a whole new level, and since we had pretty good success last year and the vendors seem to have a pretty good time, and the reports have kind of gotten out and around, my email gets hammered all the time, and that's going to give us a lot more options for cooler stuff from other places around the world in the U.S., and it's just going to mean it's going to be a lot more fun. What should the mite counts be in a newly purchased nuke? Well, in my opinion, you shouldn't. If you do an alcohol wash, you shouldn't even be seeing 1%, which would be 3 mites. It would be best if you didn't see any, of course. But if I saw 1 mite or 2 mite, I'd be like, okay, okay. But if I'm doing a wash and goodness, it's like 5 mites in there, or 8 mites in there, I'm like, doggone it. But mites happen. It's part of it, and they're in nukes, and so they're in packages too. I mean, the average package, I think, I was reading, had somewhere on average between all the group 200 and something mites in it. So that'll grow pretty quick. I mean, 400 in the next brood cycle, 800. Just keeps going. So hopefully yours aren't as high as you think they are. Little bit of TLC, little gassing with oxalic acid might be, it'd take a lot, but covering it a pretty good bit would be good. Donovan, good to see you again. Hey, Cayman, I have 8 gallons of 40-year-old honey that has changed from the seasons and taste. I have 8 gallons of 40-year-old honey. Cool. Can I feed it during our late summer/fall dearth? Thanks. Donovan, I would not do that. I wouldn't do it. Honey really ages differently for different species. So for bees, it is their designed food source, and it impacts them in a totally different way than it does us. And I imagine that honey has had all kinds of things change in it, and they do. Bob's got a great lecture on this. And so it probably would be, there's no probably, it would be worse for them than feeding them sugar syrup. Honestly, if the honey is still fairly decently has a decent taste, I would jar that up and sell it as vintage honey and put in some extravagant bottles. Heck, it doesn't even have to taste that good. Just say it's vintage and get some people to try some 40-year-old honey. I'd be interested in that. I mean, that stuff's older than I am. But it's not good for the bees. And see, what our bodies would be just fine with it because our gut can eliminate a lot of the stuff the bees can't. So I wouldn't do it. Who knows? They might have an old strain of European foul brood in that honey that's still dormant or something, and you'd awaken it. That would be wild. Bradford String Instruments. I have 6 Italian colonies, and I'm getting 3 mated Carney queens and 3 Corey Stevens virgin queens. Should I worry about how well they will get mated with them in the same yard and not a mile away? I wouldn't worry about it. Even if you moved them a mile away, I'm not worried about it. There should be plenty of drones if you're doing this in the spring during the best time of the year. There's going to be some drones out there. If you're doing dozens and dozens at a time, it'd be a concern. But I wouldn't worry about it. And if you're doing that in like late August, early September, it'd be something else. Drones not only are in shorter supply, but they're also a lot more mite-ridden and virus-ridden at that point, typically, if they're going to be. But that sounds great. I actually was looking through some Corey Stevens queens yesterday, and they lay really good. They've done really good for me. Laid some good patterns. So, and the quality of the queen cells were very good. Some very nice queen cells. I didn't try the virgins, but I imagine they're good too. So I turned my walk-away split around 180 degrees from the one next to it. How and when can I turn that one back around since it's not facing the sun now? Whenever you want, you'll confuse the heck out of the bees for a couple of days, but they'll figure it out. They're pretty good about that kind of stuff. We do those kinds of things too, Bridget, and sounds like a busy time of the year. I love that thumbnail that you have. It looks kind of like cherry blossoms or some type of fruit blossom. That's what this time of the year is all about. And I've got some apple trees that I grafted, and they pulled through the winter really good, and really excited about those. It's going to take a while, but they're old heirloom varieties. Yep, I just turn around whenever you feel like it, and they'll figure it out. If the virgin, I will say one other thing so it's a walk away split. So you want to do it before the virgin queen goes out on mating flight, or after she's come back on her mating flight. So it might be what you're asking, because if she flies out and then you do it midday and you flip it around, she's like, "What the heck just happened?" Then she goes into a different hive instead, and whoo, yeah. Probably. And see, you think, oh, she's dead. Well, that's not always the case. See, in the robbing time of the year, that virgin queen would probably be eliminated at the door because they're like bouncers. But this time of the year, there's so much nectar and pollen and stuff coming in a lot of places. Everybody's welcome. Just, okay, yeah, come on in. And that virgin queen will go in there and into a different hive with a good laying queen, and the first thing she does is kill that one. Not always. Most of the time she does. But sometimes she'll just fly in there, and then she'll be a second queen. Two queens. I wonder if sometimes it's how we get 2 queens in some of our colonies. Richard says, I have a friend that had 3 hives to up and leave, and they left with brood and honey in the hive. This happened in the past 3 weeks, and after my friend had split these hives. Is this CCD? I would not say so. So he did this after he had split the hives. I bet he didn't. I wonder if he put enough actual bees in there, bee coverage. And I wonder if there's a lot of foragers in there, and then a lot of foragers went back, and then there was not enough bees to cover the brood, and then they died out due to not being able to maintain the colony or something. I don't know. I wouldn't say that that's CCD. And personally, I think CCD was some new strains of stuff coming along, but also there's a lot of poor beekeeping management involved with CCD. More mites needed to be killed. Better care needed to be done as well. Some of the guys I know that struggled with losing their bees during that period, they still have some very lazy habits 20 years later. Is it best to stagger frames with comb honey foundation? Is it best to stagger frames with comb honey foundation with frames with drawn foundation, or simply add a full box of frames with comb honey foundation? Songbird Acres. Good question. So I know Gus will have some that didn't get finished out the year before, and he'll put some of those in there to kind of bait them up, or especially if it has like a little bit of honey in it, like they drew it out and they left a little bit of honey, he'll save that and use that as a bait comb. You definitely can put some drawn combs that are foundation up in there, and that will actually lure them up there as well, because that's comb, and so they see that as theirs instantly, versus foundation, they're just like, what the heck. But they do prefer strips and cluster space more than having solid sheets of foundation. Though they'll work it, but bees like that that area to work and then draw what they want. So yeah, I put a couple combs up in there and see how it works for you, and then just pay attention, because if they fill those combs up really fast, they'll fatten those up, and then they'll make the ones for comb honey super skinny there. But it sounds like a good plan. Let me know, Cliff, if you try it out. And I'm not a comb honey expert. Gus Mitchell is the comb honey man. So maybe you ought to see if he'll answer a question if you send him a message. He'll probably kill me, but, whatever. So Steve Amos asked a question at 8:49. One more question regarding swarming in OA. How long after the swarm do I dare using OA on the parent colony, not wanting to mess up the new virgin queen? So that you're exactly right. OA could get a virgin queen eliminated due to the And here's round 2. All right, so sorry about that. Things were going pretty well, and my son decided to yank the Wi-Fi cord, and so, yeah, taking his cleansing flight. That was earlier. Please stand by technical difficulties. Oh, goodness. Some good comments, though. Thank you guys for sticking around. Some of those are really funny. Laurel got a kick out of the one where I got plugged, Vanderpool Farm, so don't be giving her any ideas now. Cayman, I'm just now getting some pollen come in. I'm doing some heavy feeding, but I have 100% survival for the first time. I'm going to try raising queens this year. Thanks for your videos. Hey, John, hope you're doing good up there in Vermont, and the weather cooperates really good. 100% survival is just awesome, especially in an extreme area like Vermont where you get some real winter weather. So excellent job. I hope to hear some good things for your bees in the future, and just keep me posted. I'll get back to that question. It was about treating OA on a colony that has a virgin. So if we think that the cell, or if there's already a virgin in there or whatever, we think the virgin's going to be active on, let's say today, the 14th of April. Well, we've got to calculate that she's probably going to be in there for a couple days, and then it's going to take a few days for her to go on a mating flight. So we're probably talking a week right there. And then she's going to take a day or two just to start laying because all of a sudden all this chemistry is going on. So then we want to let her lay for about a week. So if you think a virgin is there on the 14th, I probably don't want to do OAV, and I want to do a light dose. Maybe come in and check them on the exactly 2 weeks or so later after that virgin's been in there. We want to catch it before they cap the brood, but we want to let her lay a good bit too, and that would be good. It's a little tedious here because we definitely don't want to off a young queen. But if she's been laying hard for 5 or 6 days, that still gives you a little bit of a window there. But it's tight. Even if you miss a little bit of it and they start capping for like 1 day, you're still getting a good bit of the mites. I wish we had a treatment where we could do like what I used to do with Apivar, and you'd make your splits up, and you'd put a queen cell in there, and you could create basically you create a big brood break because you drop a queen cell in there, you make your split, and while all the brood is emerging out, that whole process of turnaround and exposure of the mites, those strips are in there killing. But Apivar just has not worked good for me in the last few years, and so any other treatment that we have is a lot more risky to a virgin queen. All right. I came and I had a strong nuke fell over 2 weeks, and there was a fair bit of excrement on the front of the hive. If not nosema, what else could cause this, Steve? So sometimes it can be some other odds and ends. So Etienne tardif would be somebody that I would want to know. Nosema, no. Diet. I mean, the food can be an issue. There's some foods that like fall foods that aren't actually good for bees. Even if they're natural, they crystallize. And I'm not a northern beekeeper, so like know this much when it comes to this kind of stuff. Or even, and I haven't really had any issues with this down here at all. So I really had no reason to study up on this. But Etienne tardif, north of 60s, up at the 60th parallel, north of it, in Yukon, and he has some really good information on these kind of issues, because when your bees are like closed up for 6.5 months of the year or whatever it is, it's crazy, 6 months, 5 months, whatever, there's a lot of these issues that can happen. So I really don't know, but he would be the person I would look for. And he's done a lot of studies and microscope work with that. And he was a speaker at our conference this last year and did a great job. Justin orders. What? Oh, Justin orders. Sorry, I can't help it. I make fun of everybody. Found a sterile queen in one of my nukes today. Born this year. Didn't treat with oxalic acid. How does that happen? Great seeing you at the North Carolina conference. That was a fun one. I really enjoyed myself quite a bit there. Making fun of Corey is always a pleasure of mine. But no, we get along just good. I have a lot of regard for Corey because his queens are raised really good. I'm still learning to see about the mite control capability. We'll see some of that this year, but the quality of the queens is really good. A lot of efforts put into only having really good stuff. So I'm a big fan of anybody that's really good like that. So sterile queens can happen, though, and I was talking to Corey about this. Things happen. Sometimes there's a little damage in the cell. This can happen when we're fooling with them. Sometimes it happens in nature. Things happen, and the queen will emerge out, and there's something wrong with her plumbing, and she's not able to get mated properly. Things happen. Maybe she got damaged. There was a windstorm, got blown up against something, whatever. But you will find this, and out of 100 queens, I mean, you expect this to happen a couple times. And this the queens will lay sometimes, like they're egg, perfect patterns, and then the bees will cannibalize it because there's something wrong with it. And then sometimes they just can't lay at all, and they're just a huge fat queen, and you just never see anything from them. So not 100% sure. It's just one of those things that makes you scratch your head, and I'm sure there's a reason for it. But that's why it's an insurance or a numbers game. Always trying to make sure we have excess. All right. Hi, Cayman. Why do people say not to harvest honey from a new hive in its first year? Like you said, can't you harvest the honey and just feed syrup? Is there something special about the first year? Well, I think part of it is based off of a lot of times you don't get honey the first year because by the time you get your bees and how long most places have flows, I mean, there's a lot of variables, and that's why these blanket statements are kind of dangerous to a degree. And that's why I constantly have to back up and say it could be different here, or there's variables, all that kind of stuff. And it is complicated. There's places that I know of that get honey flows for 12 to 15 weeks of the year. They're not common, but there are places like that. And obviously bees do way better in those areas, and obviously you have a better chance of getting a crop from a situation like that in the first year. And then there's places like Tennessee, and most places are more like myself, where you have about 6 to 8 weeks of prime honey flow. And sometimes it'll be a little bit longer some years, and sometimes it'll be a little bit shorter depending on the weather. And so if I get a package the first week of April, there's basically no chance that I'm getting a honey crop off of that in its first year. Now, if I was to get a really strong nuke the first week of April, it's possible I could get a little bit in a very good year. But what if I was to get that nuke of the first week of March? Oh yeah, I'm making a little bit of honey off of that. And that's where some of the variables are at too, is location, but also timing. What if somebody comes and buys a nucleus colony from me next weekend? Oh, they are. And some of them are coming from northern Illinois, and some of them are in Wisconsin. They're way behind us. These nukes are powerful and strong, and by the time they get to their honey flow, they're going to be stronger than 10 frames. And so it's not a nuke anymore. And so they're going to make honey. I've had people actually from up north buy nukes from me in April, and they also had drawn combs, which definitely impacts the colony quite a bit because they're not putting their resources towards drawing combs, and also spending a lot of their time doing that. They're focused more on gathering at that point. But they'll come down and they'll grab my bees and buy them, and they'll go and take them up there, and they'll put them on some combs, and the queen can just lay up, and then they put all the nectar above. And I've had people report and say they'll get 2 mediums of honey off of our nukes, but it's always people that are way north of me, and their seasons are way behind mine. And so there's a lot of variables. But if you get 2 or 3 combs, or even a full super full of honey, pull it off, feed them, do what you want. They're your bees, and it's not going to hurt them feeding them. A lot of people think that it will. It'll hurt them if they run short. But if you constantly keep them in food, do what you want. You're going to anyways. Hey, Cayman, I know winter's almost is over, but still fresh on my brain. Would it be wise to remove a center frame so the bees can ball up better to stay warm? I'm in Ohio. I don't think so. Just probably leave them just the way that they are. Bees like to have combs. And a lot of times what they'll do, if there's a comb in the middle of the cluster or multiple combs, and there typically is on a good-sized cluster, as they consume honey or they come across empty cells, they will go into that. And, so they'll form a really tight ball, and there will be bees in the cells even. And it's not going to hurt them. Besides, if you have my type of luck, a decent flow will hit the next week, and they'll just build a new comb in that area, and then you'll have to tear it down. Man Lake has boxes on sale a few weeks ago for about $13 a box with free shipping. That's not too surprising. It's amazing what happens when you're bleeding out. But hey, Scott, thanks for saying so. Appreciate that very much. Luke Horning, how many colonies do you currently manage? So we have a couple hundred honey production colonies, but if you include nukes and mating nukes and all kinds of stuff, we've got over 500 queens and colonies that we're maintaining. Thankfully, in a couple weeks, a lot of those nukes will be sold, and our lives will just be busy instead of insane. So, just a couple hundred, Luke. We used to do a little bit more than that, but YouTube videos and conferences have kind of slowed down my bee game. But I've got a plan, and I've got a guy that I'm interested in hiring in the long term, and if that works out, that's going to free up a lot of my time. So more bees. I'm north of Longview, Texas, and I ordered my nuke from Man Lake and Marshall. Didn't know you sold till tonight. Yeah, I do. Sorry, we don't do the best job advertising. I need to work on a personal website instead of just a Hive Life one. But, yeah, we're going to be selling nukes the 22nd, so that's coming up real soon. And then we'll have some on May the 6th as well. And I actually have not sold out of all my nukes, but we do have a lot more than I thought I was going to have. And also, we understand the numbers game, too. So if we commit to, let's say, 100 nukes to sell, then I'm going to have 130 prepared, and because not all of them will be ready when they're supposed to. And that's just the name of the game. But yeah, I do have actually some extras, and if anybody needs any, just send an email to us or something like that, and they are ready to work. So there was a question about, we'll get to it in just 1 second. Hey, fed my bees last fall. They still have some of that sugar water still stored in my frames. Any tips with removing those so they don't get in the way with the honey crop? Make a split. Use them for that. That's typically how we deal with them. Or give those frames to colonies that aren't going to make honey if you have any. And put some drawn. And that's where drawn combs are so valuable. We'll make splits up. We'll put the resources in that. And we'll give our colonies we pull the resources just straight drawn combs. The queen can just lay those up, and the bees can fill them up with bee bread or whatever they want to do with them. I wouldn't be too terrible worried about it, though. If you have a lot of space, the bees are not going to move sugar syrup up into the honey supers if they don't have to. The only time they're going to do that is if the queen is just completely out of room. So, for example, let's say that we force the queen down into a 10-frame box. That's the only room she has to lay. And there's 4 solid frames of sugar syrup ripened up in 4 frames. So the queen needs more than 6 frames to lay on, so they are going to clear that, and they are going to push it above. But if you're in a double deep situation, which is way more room than a queen needs to lay, then they're probably not going to move any of it up because there's no need to. They're not going to do that work for nothing. They'll just move the nectar up above. It's easier for them to transport nectar as they're ripening it than to pull honey out of a cell or sugar syrup and move it out. So, let me know what you decide to do, Brandon. Got to make a business decision. How many weeks prior to the honey flow should I feed pollen patties, or is it even necessary? Thanks for your explanation. So, John, great question. One that I hear people ask, and some people get heated about this one. So, there's a lot of people that don't ever feed pollen patties. This probably was one of the best years for not feeding them. Some years they're crucial to us being able to sell a nucleus colony and make the honey crop that we want to make. Very crucial. And some years going into winter, they're very important because the fall flow, there's a drought, it doesn't perform good. We need fat, healthy bees and lots of them. And that pollen patty sometimes is what saves our rear ends. And when we make up like nukes to sell, what if we get a week of rain? We want these nukes to continue to grow at the best rate possible. And we definitely don't want them going backwards. So we'll put pollen patties in there. So pollen patties are just tools. Used correctly can really help you out. And sometimes they're just a waste. There's so much pollen coming in, there's just no reason to do it. Now, I would feed them any time that my bees are wanting to brood up and there's not a lot of pollen and resources coming in. So let's say you get your maple pollen. That's your first one. That's what we get. And then you're just getting some terrible weather, just raining and cold for weeks afterwards. That's when you're feeding pollen patties. The bees want to rear brood, but they're not able to get a lot of flying days. Pollen patties, pollen patties, pollen patties. But hey, if they're getting out 5 days a week out of 7 and they're bringing in pollen every one of those days, there's just no reason to feed them. So it's just another tool in the toolbox. But they're very helpful when used correctly, and I really like them. So I marked a queen with a paint marker, and she went unconscious, then started passing eggs. Ever seen this? Yeah, Ray, I actually have. I actually saw a commercial queen rearer accidentally have a little spasm in his hand and made one pass out. And I thought he thought he killed it, set it to the side, and eventually it came to and worked out. Sometimes when we paint queens, whether we pick them up by hand or we put them in a container, we knock the wind out of them, maybe a little bit longer than we intended to, and this can render them unconscious and sometimes damage them permanently. But sometimes it just knocks them out, and then they just, and it was just the worst day ever. Probably took 2 months off that queen's life, but she might still be a good one. I've never seen a mating flight. Does it look like kind of a small swarm? So maybe that's what you saw today. I can't read the rest of that sentence, but I've actually never, as many queens as I've raised, I've never seen one come back from a mating flight. So I can't tell you in person. I've seen videos of it, and I can tell you this. I mean, so like in a mating nuke, we'll have 2 frames of bees. I mean, when I say 2 frames of bees, that's the coverage, very good coverage. And so there'll be 1 frame of brood, 1 frame of food, good coverage, and then there'll be 1 drawn comb or a foundation or whatever. And then there's a queen cell in between the 2 good frames. And then when that queen comes back, it's amazing how many times they plug those 3 frames entirely. Instantly. She hasn't had a chance to lay yet. So they bring back bees with them, and sometimes not as much as others. It's one of those things where we still don't fully know what's going on, but I can tell you right now that I've had some that have brought back a good frame of bees or so with them. And it can be a good bit of drones too. They just bring back a cohort. Just such a good queen. I still have an excellent idea on a product we should get set up and ready for next Hive Life. I'd split the profits with you 50-50. Let the thought roll around your head and let me know. So is that part of the email too? I didn't pay too much attention. I'll look at it here in a little bit, Terry. But if it's going to be fun for Hive Life and good, we're always interested. Can't wait to see what the Hive Life 2024 vendor hall looks like. If it gets too much bigger, you'll have to add a day. So we're probably going to add a day, Luke, for a lot of reasons. First of all, for all of our sanity on the staff. So what I'm thinking, those days are long. A lot of you guys have been, and some of you have been to every single one of them, and thank you guys for helping make Hive Life what it is. But it's long days. I mean, you get up early, you hork down some breakfast really quick, and then you get over there and we start like at 8-something o'clock. and then we're going till like 6:30. It's long days, and then you got to get dinner, and then a lot of times there's bluegrass on the Friday night, so it's just a long day. And so our staff is pretty wore out, and I thought, well, why not extend it one more day for a couple reasons. First of all, that would give folks an opportunity to spend a little bit more time networking, and what we would do is take a couple of the speaking engagements, the classes, off of the Friday and Saturday, just trim like one apiece. So it shortens Friday and Saturday just a little bit so the days aren't quite so brutal, and we put that into the Thursday, have a whole day Thursday, and that also will give us a few more opportunities for speaking to where we can maybe do some more specialty stuff. There's a lot of ideas, and that doesn't mean we're going to do it. I have a lot of ideas. Laurel's the one that keeps them from getting out of control. I already got that one, Chris. I already got that one. So I took 3 frames of brood with bees, solid frames of brood from a strong colony. I'm thinking I can use them as a small cell builder to make 5 queens, and then 2 weeks make 20 queens. 2 weeks might be a little bit longer depending on the age of the brood. If it's all fixing to emerge out soon, those bees might be getting a little long in the tooth by the time they're making queens. You want to make sure that you have plenty of nurse bees and that they're not getting too old. You might still be able to, though. Cutting a little bit close there. But yeah, 3 solid frames of brood. Go in there a few days after you put them in there. Make sure that you cut down any cells that they're trying to raise off of those frames of brood. And you can cut those down and actually use the royal jelly. So for those of you who are thinking about grafting, it is a little bit easier when you prime the cups. It does take more time and preparation time. It's not necessary. I often do what's called dry grafting. We feed the colony that we're grafting from, even right now, to make sure that there's just copious amounts of royal jelly under the larvae. However, you can prime the cells too, so if you have extra royal jelly that you make in these queenless starters, you just put some larvae down in there and then come back 2 days later, and there's just going to be all kinds of royal jelly in some of those. And you can scoop that out very easily, and then you mix that. You don't have to, but to make it a little bit easier to handle, instead of, it's real viscous, and so it's very hard to drop into there, you can pull it out, mix it 1-to-1 with distilled water. And it doesn't need to be cold, so this needs to be at least room temperature. It'd be better if it was closer to 80 odd degrees. We don't want it too hot, so 80s would be great, 90, but room temperature would be okay for a little bit, as long as it wasn't too long. And you get that 1-to-1, and you just use a dropper, and you can just drop that in there, and it makes it a little bit easier to transfer the larvae, and they won't dry out that way either. But raising queens is something that anybody with a little bit of practice, I think, can do. Use a 5-frame nuke system. We got a video on that. And raising your own queens. So guys, I've visited a lot of large commercial operations, and there's a lot of demands that commercial beekeeping has that hobbyists and small guys like me just don't have. But still, there's no excuse for low quality stuff. What's the point of selling a bum queen? There's no point in it except making a buck. And you're not delivering on the fair exchange that the market is supposed to be. Someone pays $100, they deserve $100 or more in value and service, and we seem to have forgotten that in this country quite a bit. And in beekeeping, we need more people who are coming into it with that mentality that they're going to bring that proper value to the industry, and that's what my channel's for, is for helping those type of people get the word out. I'll help market for them. But some of these queens that I'm seeing raised on the commercial level, they just are not given the attention that the queens deserve. It's the most important part of the engine that makes up a good hive of bees. And what you guys can do at home, you can make better queens. You can do it, and they'll be awesome. Pierce Beekeeping. Hey, Cayman. Hey, Anura. I see you've been messaging me and stuff. I want to reach out to you. I'll probably be driving next week. I'll give you a call. We'll talk about this new device of yours. I've actually been thinking of you in a couple instances this week with trying to do some comb honey and using your comb cutter this year for the comb honey. But I am just unbelievably busy. This is just I dream about bees. I wake up and work bees. My back's killing me. I don't have time for this right now. But we got to do it, and we're making it happen. All right, lots of questions. Castle Hives, howdy, howdy. Hey, Cayman, I'm 15 minutes east of Atlanta, Georgia. Had a strong colony go into the winter with 2 brood deeps at 1% mites around October. Population reduced to less than a brood box. What happened? Thanks. All right, so October, it's still fairly warm in Georgia. And what's going to happen, there's a couple things that could play into this, but all the old bees, forager bees, any of those things, they get sacked. So there's no reason for the colony to run anything like 2 brood deeps through the winter. It's too many bodies to feed, too many mouths, and it takes a lot more energy. So they're going to, any bee that is not a winter bee will be sacked and gotten rid of. They'll run themselves out and sacrifice themselves. Drones will be kicked out. So you'll lose a lot of population. That's just natural. They do that for survival. Now, the other thing that could happen, if that was 1% in October in Georgia, there's still some brood if it's Italians. So in 21 days, it's probably going to be 2%. So it's not that you can't overwinter with around 2% or greater mite infestation, especially if it's a good, healthy colony that's been fed well. But increased mite loads means that you're going to also have mites that are going around and eating on bees all winter long as well, and that is going to chip away at the numbers that come out of winter. But hey, you still got the colony through the winter, and so I would think that the mites need to be kept a little bit lower. If I'm seeing 1% in October in Georgia, I'm going to hit them with a little bit more stuff if you didn't afterwards. But just because you have a big population going in the winter, it's all about the winter bees. So that's why we really baby bees in September and October, and feed some pollen patties if we feel like we need to. Get those nurse bees. All right, so we got 8 minutes. We're gonna go to a full 2 hours. So let's take those questions. So Vanderpool Farms has a suggestion. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Vanderpool is a commercial beekeeper out in Oregon. Be very careful in the selection of queen marking paint. One producer that I know of lost thousands of queens a couple years ago due to faulty paint, and then they had to replace all of them. Ooh, man, that would really stink. Losing 1 or 2 is rough. Losing that would just be unbelievable. I just bought 8 queens, 1 nuke, even though they accepted her in the cage. They killed her once they released her. Any idea what the cause could be? It could be a couple different things. And the nuke, there was not any queen that you accidentally put in there, and it happens. I mean, I've done it myself where we make splits and oops, accidentally threw the queen in there. Sometimes you saw. Well, I know I saw the queen. I left her, but then it could have been a 2 queen colony, and it does happen this time of the year. Sometimes the queens that you get aren't good, and this is one of the biggest frustrations when you cannot raise your own. You have no control over the queens, or you don't have a good supplier, and let me tell you, all the good suppliers are taken. It's not impossible, but it's difficult to get someone who actually produces very high quality queens on a frequent basis because they are so busy. They can't produce enough. And so if you can get some from some of those guys that have high standards, then it's a great relationship. Do not burn that bridge. But a lot of the commercial queens that you get, the cheaper ones out of the South, and some of the big guys. I mean, I've had queens that they just sucked out of the cage, and sometimes I look at them like that looks like a virgin in that cage, like she didn't even get mated. So I really, really, really hate buying queens unless I know the person. And I still hate buying them because they're expensive. But buying queens is a pain. Packages, queen issues. It's rough because you start out with a package, or you make that split, and the queen doesn't work out. Well, it doesn't matter how good of a beekeeper you are if you don't have a queen. Tennessee's Bees, what is your preferred method for banking mated queens for a week or two? All right, great question. I do not like to bank them any longer than I have to. So 2 is probably as long as I've ever banked them. I'm not even sure I've gone that long. I hate banking queens. It's not good for them. The longer they're banked, the harder it is to get them to be accepted, and also it can have some long-term issues. You can do it right, but the most important thing is they need to be really well taken care of. So we want nurse bees. The first thing I'm going to do is, let's say I have, oh goodness, what do I do with that? Well, it's somewhere. Oh, there it is. So these are the type of cages that I use. They're JZBZ. I like them because they fit into a lot of things. So one of the things that they fit into is a bar, and so I'll put like 20 of them into it, or they'll have a battery box that you can buy. It's an orange box that'll hold 20 of these. And so if you're wanting to transport them or keep them in there short term, you can put them into there and shake some nurse bees in there, and they'll take care of them. Put a little bit of queen candy in there and a sponge. They need water, and that will work. That's really short term. But if we're wanting to do a long period of time, you can set them into a colony that's just a bunch of young bees, and that'll work really good. But I specifically take them to a new location. These are our queens here. Call it excessive. I will shake bees from big, strong colonies and take them to a new location. And if it's 20 queens, it'll be probably 4 frames to 5 frames of nurse bees. And if I'm wanting to do it long term, and I'll stick them in there, and I'll feed them and give them anything that they need, and those nurse bees will just baby them and baby them. They won't harass them. It's the old bees that'll do that, especially during a dearth. The other thing is, if you can have a little shipping box, like the ones that you ship them in, and you can put these in there, and you can just shake nurse bees in there. But then I'd come back probably around 6 to 7 days later, and I would get rid of those bees, and I would shake new nurse bees in there. It's just all about keeping those nurse bees that are wanting to baby the queens, and to make sure that there's plenty of food and water in there as well. A sponge, keeping that wet all the time, not sopping, but it needs to be wet. That's what you want. So preferred banking method, there is not I don't have a preferred banking method. You can do all kinds of fancy stuff. I don't really bank queens much. I just don't do it. I don't like banking queens. So what's the thickest syrup that the Tractor Supply DC pump in your last video will pump? So it won't pump solids. Very few pumps can handle honey or straight syrup or anything like that. It's so viscous at full strength. And so the Honda pump that I have that came from Commercial Bee Supply, I had it at the conference. It still has to be 10% water added to syrup in order to be able to be used. So most pumps, you have to thin it down, and it just has to be a very strong pump to be able to handle it. And most pumps that can pump full strength syrup aren't the greatest pumps for toting out in the field and feeding bees. And it's better to feed bees thinner syrup than it is thick syrup anyways. Because as they're ripening it up, it's better for the bees. However, I understand you're probably wanting to use this to transfer as well as feed, and that's the problem. Is I don't know of a good pump that does both of those things. I have pumps to transfer syrups and honeys, and I have pumps to feed bees. Different pumps, different use. I'm so excited you got to my question. They were queens from Barnyard Bees. There definitely wasn't any other queens in the Nuke. They are making queen cells now. I'll set up a QMN soon. Well, thanks for coming on, Fred. I appreciate it. I think Barnyard gets his from gardeners or somebody down in there. They focus on raising so many queens, and then being transferred from them to him and then to you. That's those guys that are making that many queens, gardeners is just massive. Or it's a lot. Okay, let's see. Get into some questions. So that video I did with Josh on that pump was quite a bit of fun. I have several videos that need to be worked on. Bradford String Instruments, thanks for all you do. How about a hive decorating competition at the next Hive Life? $10 per hive to enter. Proceeds go to charity. Winner gets an autographed T-shirt. Chris, make a mental note of that. We're adding a lot of stuff already, but you know, what's one more thing? That sounds like it could be fun. Maybe do that on that extra day. Castle Hives, I do the same. Came only from people I know. Oh, Jose, Greg, and Corey Stevens. Oh yeah, good guys. All good guys. So Jason Powell, any luck with Straken apiaries? And see, some people do and some people don't. I wasn't super impressed with the queens. Half of the queens I got from them, but granted, I only got 4. I got the Carnies, and then I got the Saskatraz or whatever they are, and the Saskatraz were just so pathetic. I just requeened them after about a month and a half. I just couldn't, and I don't think it was the genetics. I know it wasn't the genetics. I just think the queens weren't made properly, and the Carnies performed well. We raise queens, and all of our queens do well. I mean, we get a higher percentage, I believe, than these commercial guys do, but we baby ours a lot more, and we don't raise near as much. We definitely don't make as much money. However, so you expect some loss, some percentage of loss, but some of these commercial operators, 30% losses are normal with them, and that's too high. That's way too high. Off of mine, my mated queens, I would be upset to get 5%. All right, everybody. Is there any chance bees will draw a comb above an excluder? They can, but it's not good. Take that excluder out. Let them start drawing. Once they've committed to 2 or 3 frames that they've drawn a decent bit, shake all the bees down, put the excluder. Now they'll go through because they have comb up above. Barry, it was good to see you the other day. I saw your text. It is past my bedtime. I am tired, and I need to eat some dinner. I think Laurel's got a roast going in there. Ooh, it's going to be good if I can stay awake. Hey, Josh, thanks for watching our videos. You started last year with 2 hives, followed our tips, and you're up to 7 now without learning from your videos. I don't think I'd be as successful as I have been. Well, that's good to hear. I appreciate that a lot because it's a lot of work doing these things, and our goal is to be useful to the bee industry and not just say it and not just be on YouTube for the sake of being on YouTube. We actually want to see people get better at beekeeping. We want to see the beekeeping economy do better. We want to see new things, and we want to see more people selling honey and trying new stuff out. So I'm super excited about the future of beekeeping. It seems like a lot of good things are happening right now. So thanks, everybody, for coming on. We will see you probably a couple weeks from now. Probably try to do 1-2 weeks from now, another live chat. So thanks for coming on again, and we will see you in the next video.